And we are live. We are going to continue the history of the year of the five emperors, and we're going to start in Herodian, Book 2, Section 6. When the news of Pertinax's murder became generally known among the people, everyone was thrown into a confusion of grief and rushed about as though possessed. In a blind fury, they were searching for the culprits, but without being able to find them to take their revenge. The senators, in particular, were angered by what had happened and observed it as a public disaster to lose so mild a father and so worthy a champion. They were afraid that once again they would have a tyranny, because apparently this was what the soldiers liked. After 1 or 2 days, the common people, in fear of their lives, began to retire, and those in positions of authority went away to their estates as far away from Rome as they could, to avoid being in the city and persecuted when the new regime was established. After the soldiers discovered all was quiet and no one was brave enough to prosecute them for the murder of the emperor, they stayed shut up behind their walls, but stationed some of their number who had the loudest voices on the walls to announce that the position of emperor was up for sale. They promised to entrust the power to the highest bidder and conduct him safely back to the palace under the name of armed protection. As the announcement circulated, none of the more respectable, firmly established senators, that is, the patricians and those who still possessed some wealth and who were left from Commodus's reign of tyranny, went to the camp wall. They had no intention of taking part in this improper, scandalous purchase of the empire. But there was a man called Julianus, an ex-consul, who was reputed to be a man of considerable means. It was getting on towards evening as he was feasting when the news of the soldiers' offer reached him while he was a drunken stupor. He was one of those about whom there were ugly stories concerning his intemperate life. His wife and daughters and a number of clients persuaded him to get up quickly from his couch and run to the camp wall to find out what was happening. All the way there, they advised him to seize possession of the empire while it lay abandoned, and by sparing no expense, to outbid all possible rivals by the size of his bride. So when he reached the walls, Julianus shouted up that he would undertake to give them all that they wanted, and added that he had a lot of money and treasure chests full of gold and silver. But at the same time, another man came to bid for the empire. He was Julianus, who was also an ex-consul and now held the post of urban prefect, as well as being father-in-law to Pertinax. But the soldiers would not consider him because they were afraid of the close relationship to Pertinax and thought this was a trick to gain revenge for his murder. They therefore let ladders down and brought Julianus up onto the wall, because they were not anxious to open the gates until they found out how much money he intended to pay them. When he had climbed up the ladder, Julianus promised first to reinstate Commodus's reputation by restoring the honors and statues which the Senate had removed, then to allow them as much freedom as they had had under Commodus, and finally to give each man more money than he dreamt of asking for or getting. What was more, he said, there would be no delay, since he would send for the money from his home right away. This was enough for the soldiers, whose expectations were roused by these bribes, and they hailed Julianus as emperor. And in addition to his family, and gentle name, they voted him the name Commodus. Then they lifted up their standards upon which the portraits of Commodus had been restored and hurried to set off in possession. Julianus completed the customary imperial sacrifices inside the camp before being escorted on his way by a larger contingent of guards than normal. The reason for this was because he had brought the empire by an immoral and scandalous fraud, using force to go against the wishes of the people, and he had good reason to fear popular hostility. So the soldiers put on full armor and formed up in close battle order, ready to fight if they had to, placing their emperor in the middle of the escort and raising their shields and spears above their heads to prevent any stones being thrown on to the procession from the houses. They conducted him to the palace. None of the common people dared to stand in their way, but neither did anyone cheer him the way people usually do along the emperor's route. On the contrary, they stood off at a distance and shouted curses and insults at him for procuring the empire in exchange for money. This was the first time that the soldiers' characters gradually began to be corrupted. They learned to have an evil and insatiable lust for money and to ignore any feeling of respect for their emperors. The fact that there was nobody to take revenge on the perpetrators of this savage murder of an emperor and nobody to prevent the shameful auction and sale of the empire was a prime cause for the development of a shameful state of indiscipline that had permanent consequences for the future. The ever-increasing avarice of the soldiers and their contempt for authority had developed to the extent of murder. And that is the end of section 7.